Hi, Ghost Recaps here. Today we will be going through an sci-fi, romance movie from 2016. Named, Passenger. There will be spoilers ahead in this video, so chill out and enjoy. A spaceship named Starship Avalon is on a journey to the extrasolar planet Homestead 2, which is 60 light years away from Earth. The ship is in autopilot mode, with 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship passes through an asteroid belt. Power is diverted to the main shield to keep the shield more powerful. But the ship is on a collision course with a massive asteroid. A giant asteroid is not destroyed in time and collides with the ship, causing various malfunctions in the ship. The ship begins self-repair, but the ship's systems are still indicating a malfunction, something that cannot be corrected by self-repair. Only then does one of the hibernation pods become active. The waking passenger is Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. His pod opens, and an automated system helps him awake. She tells her that he has spent 120 years of his life sleeping and that the ship is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. She was told that it is normal to feel confused and weak after hibernating. The wristband on his arm is scanned, and the computer directs him to his cabin. The next day, Jim gets dressed and goes out, but he doesn't see a single human being. He goes into an automated classroom designed for the entire teaching group, but even here he is alone. Jim is a little worried and nervous. He asks the holographic lady where the others are, and the lady answers that we are all here together. Hearing this, Jim sees something wrong and starts running here and there in the ship. He reaches the ship's main hall, where an automated information desk offers help. Jim asks to speak to a real person and is sent to speak to a manager, but when he learns there is no one there, he asks to speak to the captain. When he reaches the bridge, even though he does not have access to the inside, he can see that none of the crew members are awake. Jim eventually makes it to the observatory, where he learns that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. Then he realizes he's woken up too early. He sends a message to the Homestead company on Earth that his hibernation pod has malfunctioned and he's woken up too early. Everyone else is asleep, and it's still going to take 90 years to get to Homestead 2. And he doesn't know how to go back into hibernation. He records the message and sends it, but was shocked to see that he would get the reply after 55 years. Frustrated, he is returning to his room when he sees a bartender named Arthur. When he goes to get her a drink, Jim learns that she is an android, leaving him disappointed again. He asks Arthur, "What should I do if my hibernation pod malfunctions?" Arthur says the hibernation pod can never malfunction. Jim says, "So how did I wake up?" Jim wakes up the next day and goes to the cantina, where he quickly learns that most of the items on the menu are reserved for gold class passengers only. He takes his plain coffee and tries to figure out how to fix his hibernation chamber. After getting all the equipment, he manages to operate it and lies down inside the pod. But nothing happens. Next, he tries to break down the door to get to the crew's hibernation rooms but fails. After the collision with the asteroid, the ship was getting many errors. One day, Jim told Arthur that he would grow old and die alone on the ship. Arthur says to stop worrying about what you can't handle and enjoy the journey. Jim tries all the restaurants, games, and entertainment systems that were only available to gold-class passengers, but as time goes by, being alone makes it even more miserable for him. It's been a year since he woke up. One day he passes by the hibernation pods drunk and throws away the empty bottle. Then he puts on a space suit and jumps into space by opening the airlock door. Tears welled up in his eyes when he saw the view of distant space, realizing how small and alone he was in this infinite universe. He comes back inside, takes off the suit, and goes back into the airlock without putting it on. He now pulls the lever to commit suicide, but changes his mind at the last moment, runs back inside, and slips on a bottle. When he stands up, he sees a girl named Aurora sleeping in the hibernation pod, and he is instantly attracted to her. He studies the passenger profile of the Aurora that he recorded before the ship left. She is a reporter traveling to the homestead to seek adventure and learn why people choose to be colonists. Seeing Aurora gives Jim a reason to live. He goes to Aurora's pod every day and sees him. One day he gets the idea to wake Aurora up, and he talks to Arthur about it. Arthur says that this idea is great, but it would be like murdering Aurora. Because once Aurora wakes up, she cannot go back into hibernation, so she will die of old age on this ship and never reach Homestead 2. For a moment, he goes against his judgment and tells himself not to think about Aurora. But after being alone for a year now, he can no longer tolerate the loneliness and finally decides to wake her up, knowing that it is tantamount to killing her. He approaches the pod and causes it to malfunction, causing the pod to open and Aurora to wake up. He escapes before she can see him and goes back to his room. After a while, he goes to the main concourse, hoping to find her. And there he is, as confused as he himself was a year ago. Jim tells her that only they are awake and takes her to the observatory. He then tells her that he cannot reach the crew or the main command of the ship. Aurora panics and wants to go back to her pod. But Jim explains to him that this is not possible. Special equipment is needed to hibernate a person, and hibernation pods can only put a person to sleep, they cannot take him back to hibernation. He tells her that she should rest, as she has just come out of hibernation. Aurora feels sorry for him as he spends more than a year alone on the ship. Jim goes back to the bar, feeling remorse for his actions. He tells Arthur that I have woken Aurora, but you keep this a secret. The next day, Aurora wakes up. She goes back to the concourse and asks the automated information desk about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her there, and they go to breakfast. As soon as he leaves, something goes wrong at the information desk. At the cantina, Aurora learns that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year and brings him the gold class breakfast as well. Aurora talks to Jim about the possibilities of fixing the pods, but Jim says he's tried everything for a year, but there's no way. While the ship is now showing several critical errors, some time later, Aurora laments about her life on Avalon. She writes, walks around the ship, and swims in the pool, becoming more and more aware of her situation. Aurora slowly gives up on finding a way to fix her current predicament, and Jim tries to cheer her up. He takes her dancing, to movies, and to the basketball court. Finally, he takes her to the bar to meet Arthur. After some time of getting to know each other, Jim asks Aurora on a date, which she accepts. After they eat, he takes her to the spacesuit room, where there are 2 suits, and they both get ready and go out. Back inside, Aurora is excited, and they go to Jim's cabin and make love. They are happy, exercising, watching the stars, and taking advantage of the ship's entertainment and restaurant venues are part of their daily routine. Another year passes, and it is Aurora's birthday, and Jim plans a special surprise. He makes a ring for her. Jim goes to the washroom, and Arthur tells Aurora that Jim intentionally woke her up, unaware that he still has to keep this a secret. Suddenly, Jim returns, and she confronts him with complete disbelief. She runs away in anger and panic. One night, she barged into his cabin while he was sleeping and attacked him with her fists. While she is on the run, Jim uses the ship's intercom to try to convince her. He tells her that he has fallen in love with her, but Aurora screams that Jim took her life. One night, while Jim was at his cabin, another failure occurred. The ship suffered a critical error, and the main command shut down. The elevators were no longer working. Even the breakfast bar was no longer working. Jim planted a tree in the main hall of the ship to convince Aurora, when suddenly they both heard the deck chief's voice on the comm, asking who planted the tree. They both run into the crowd and see Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and explain the situation to the chief. He doesn't understand how 3 pods can fail. He tells her that something is wrong with the ship, his wristband leading him to the command center, where he learns that the ship's automatic diagnostics have failed and they need to manually check each deck. He tells them how to collect data. Mancuso investigates the pods when Jim joins him there. He has discovered what happened to Aurora's pod. The deck chief had learned that there was no fault with the Aurora's pod but that Jim had woken him up. Later, he is checking the data collected on the bridge when Aurora joins him. They talk about what happened to his pod, but he tells her there's nothing he can do about it. Now we should think about fixing the ship. Jim walks in with the 16th broken robot. Mancuso feels hibernating, so he goes to rest. He coughs up blood. That night, Aurora can't sleep, so she goes for a swim. All of a sudden, the ship loses gravity and begins to sink as the pool water flows with it. The gravity drive resets, and she barely escapes alive. They both clash with each other to find Mancuso. All 3 of them go back to the bridge. Gus learns that somewhere there has been a major system failure, and the computer can create a timeline that shows the first failure occurred 2 years ago. Gus found that the first few failures caused power to deviate in an attempt to re-equalize the load, but the load became too heavy, causing more and more failures. The entire ship is at risk of ending up in space, which would doom the entire crew and passengers. At first, the affected area was in the main engine area, but they would have to do a manual inspection to tell where it was. They go to find the problem, but Mancuso faints. Jim and Aurora take him to the hospital and put him in a medical auto-diagnostic scanner. 612 diseases have been found throughout his body, and he is near death due to a malfunctioning hibernation pod. He puts on his uniform and prepares to die, gives his wristbands to Jim and Aurora so they can access areas of the ship where they need to go to repair things, and then dies. Suddenly, the lights turn an alarming red, and the ship begins to shake. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help, and they run to engineering, but the gravity drive suffers another failure. They eventually reach engineering and start looking for the problem. They found it in the power plant, and as soon as they open the hatch, the air pressure suddenly dropped as the asteroid blew a hole in the ship. She blocks it with a tablet that Jim pushes towards her, and Jim uses a liquid sealant to further seal the hole. Soon after fixing the problem, Jim realized there was more than one hole in the ship. They both follow the meteor's trajectory and find that the asteroid has hit the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can find replacement parts for it. They find and replace the part, but the process of venting the reactor's heat still fails. They do it manually, but it fails again. Jim learns that he needs to open the vent door from outside the ship so they can cool the reactor. Jim puts on the suit, and before leaving, he gives Mancuso's bracelet to Aurora. Aurora goes back to the reactor, where the temperature has reached critical levels. A bolt from the reactor goes off in his arm, and as Jim approaches the vent door, he soon realizes he has to keep the door open manually to allow the reactor's heat to escape. Although Aurora does not want Jim to stand there holding the door because it is going to be very dangerous, Jim explains to him that there are more than 5,000 people on the ship, and if they do not cool the reactor, the whole ship will explode, so this has to be done. Eventually Aurora opens the reactor, allowing all of the reactor's heat to escape through the vent doors. Jim is pushed out, his cable breaks, and his suit rips a hole. He tells Aurora that I can't come back because my cable is broken. Aurora runs to put on a spacesuit and goes in search of him. She grabs Jim's cable and brings it back, but when they get inside, he is unresponsive. She picks him up and puts him in the auto dock, but the doctor says the patient is dead. She violates medical protocol and uses Mancuso's bracelet to revive him. The medical pod automatically activates and revives Jim. Aurora forgives him, Aurora heals Arthur, and they bury Mancuso in the proper place. Later, the situation on the ship became normal. Jim works on the auto dock and tells Aurora that he has found that using command override he can put her back in hibernation at the hospital, but she will be alone again. Realizing she will never see Jim again, Aurora chooses to stay awake with him and spend her life with him on the ship. He presents her with the temporary engagement ring he made earlier, which she accepts. After 88 years, Avalon is 4 months away from Homestead 2. The captain and crew wake up and come to the main hall, where there's a huge tree, lots of vines, and vegetation. Birds are flying. Aurora's voice tells the passengers that we lived a beautiful life here while everyone else on the ship was asleep. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Have a nice day.